Hello students, welcome to my channel. So, today I am going to explain you the first lesson of the 7th standard CBSE board from the textbook Honeycomb 3 questions. So, before explaining you, let me give you one brief summary of this story. That is, it is once occurred to a certain king that if he always knew the right time to begin everything, if he knew who were the right people to listen to and whom to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important things to do, he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And this thought having occurred to him, and he had it proclaimed throughout his kingdom that he would give a great reward to anyone who would teach him what was the right time for every action and who were the most necessary people and how he might know what was the most important things to do. So, here in the 3 questions, there are 3 questions in the mind of the king. So, he wants to know the answer of those 3 questions because he thought that if he knew the answer of that 3 questions, he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And that's why he sent some messenger throughout his kingdom to spread the news that whoever will give the right answer, that person to whom that person the king is going to give a great reward or a huge prize. Okay, so now let us start the lesson. Let's see whether the king got the correct answer to those 3 questions or not. So 3 questions. The thought came to a certain king that he would never fail if he knew 3 things. These 3 things were: what is the right time to begin something? Which people should he listen to? And lastly, what is the most important thing for him to do? So these are the 3 questions that came in the mind of the king. The king therefore sent messengers throughout his kingdom, promising a large sum of money to anyone who would answer these 3 questions. As I told you, after that the king sent all the messengers. Messengers means a person who convey the message throughout his kingdom, because at that time there was no telephone facility like that. So messengers, the king used to usually send the messenger so that the information can be spread throughout the kingdom. And the king promised that whoever will give the correct answer to these 3 questions, to whom the king is going to give a large sum of money to that particular person. So, many wise men came to the king, but they all answered his question differently. So, many wise, intelligent men came, but all gave different answer to this 3 questions. So, let us see what was the reply of this first question. So, in reply to the first question, some said the king must prepare a timetable and then follow it strictly. Only in this way, they said, could he do everything at its proper time. Others said that it was impossible to decide in advance the right time for doing something. The king should notice all that was going on and avoid foolish pleasure and always do whatever seemed necessary at that time. Yet others said that the king needed a council of wise men who could help him act at the proper time. This was because one man would find it impossible to decide correctly without the help from others the right time for every action. So what was the reply? So all wise men, intelligent men came to the king and they replied those answers differently. So one person said that a king should prepare a timetable and then he should follow strictly. In this way only he could do everything at its proper time. Just like you also have timetable in your school and you also follow those timetable, isn't it? That this from this time to this time we have English period, from this time to this time we have maths period. So in this way, in a single day, if a student can read all the subjects, isn't it? So one person suggested that timetable is the best way. And other person said that it was impossible to decide in advance the right time for doing something. Some said it is impossible. It is not at all possible to say the correct time to do something which is necessary. And other person said that the king should notice everything and he should avoid foolish pleasure or any kind of luxury, and he should do whatever seemed necessary at that time. He should not spend his time in enjoying any kind of foolish pleasure. He should always notice whatever is happening around him. And another said that a council of wise men is needed. Council means, as you can see here, a group of people chosen to give advice or to make rules. So a group of people should be there always with the king. That group of people, they should always help the king, and in this way the king would do everything at a proper time. Why? Because for one man it is very much impossible to decide correctly without taking help from the others the right time for every action. So these were the answer in reply to the first question. But then others said that there were some things which could be urgent. These things could not wait for the decision of the council. In order to decide the right time for doing something, it is necessary to look into the future. And only magicians could do that. The king therefore would have to go to the magician. Now one wise man person is suggesting that sometimes, in case of urgency, you cannot wait for the decision of the council members, because at that time you have to take decision very quickly, because it is on urgent, it is the demand of the time. So in order to decide the right time for doing something, it is necessary to look into the future, and only magician can look into the future. So the king should take help from a magician. Okay, so this is another suggestion for the first question, that is, what is the right time to begin something? So these are the reply that the king got for the question, what is the right time to begin something? Let me recall you once again. What were those? First of all, somebody said that timetable, that king should maintain a timetable. Some others said it is impossible to decide in advance. Others said that king should always avoid all kind of foolish pleasure, and he should do whatever seemed necessary at that particular time. Some said that a council of wise men should be always there with the king, who would help him act at the proper time. And some other persons or other wise men said that sometimes it could be in urgent and king cannot wait for the decision of the council in order to decide the right time for doing something. So in order to that, it is necessary to look into the future, and only magician could do that. So the king should go to the magician for that help. So these were the answer that the king got for the first question. Now let us see what was the reply for the second question. In their answer to the second question, some said that the people most necessary to the king were his counselors. Others said the priest. A few others chose the doctors, and yet others said that his soldiers were the most necessary. So what was the second question? The second question was that which people should he listen to, isn't it? So in reply to that, some said that counselor. Counselor means a members of council, and council means a group of people chosen to give advice or to make rules. So the counselor are the important person for the king. Others said no, not counselor. These are the priest are the important. The most important person for the king is the priest. And some other chose doctors. Said no, doctors are the most important. And others said no, that is soldiers were the most necessary person. So these were the answer for the second question. Now let us see what were the answer that the king was getting from the third question. So to the third question, some said science, others choose fighting, and yet others religious worship. So what was the question? What is the most important thing for him to do as a king? So some said that science is the important thing. So you have to look after the science the most. Some said no, being a king, you should always choose fighting. And others said religious worship. Now let us see what was the king's reaction. As the answer to this question were so different, the king was not satisfied and gave no reward. Instead, he decided to seek the advice of a certain hermit who was widely known for his wisdom. So, now we came to know that the king was not at all satisfied with the answer that he was getting. So, he decided that no, I'm not going to give any kind of prize or reward to anyone because I'm not at all satisfied. So instead of that, he thought that he will seek the advice of a certain hermit. Hermit means a person who lives alone and leads a simple life. Okay, and who was widely known for his wisdom. Wisdom means you can say intelligent. Okay, he was known for his wisdom. The hermit lived in a wood which he never left. He saw no one but simple people. So the king put on ordinary clothes. So before he reached the hermit's hut, the king left his horse with his bodyguard and went on alone. So hermit was a very simple person. He always lived in a wood. Wood means in a small forest. And he always saw simple people. So he have no idea how king would look like. So he is always surrounded by simple people. So the king decided that no, he will not go as a king. So he put on ordinary clothes. He didn't wear his, the king's attire or the king's costume. Rather, he chose to wear some very simple ordinary clothes. And even he left his horse with his bodyguard and he went on alone. So in the middle of the way, he didn't took his horse as well as his bodyguard. He said that if I go with my horse or bodyguard, the hermit might recognize me as a king, which the king really doesn't want it. King wanted to represent himself as a simple ordinary person. So he left his horse as well as his bodyguard and he went on alone. As the king came near the hermit's hut, he saw the hermit digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and continued digging. The hermit was old and weak, and as he walked, he breathed heavily. So he was doing some work. He was digging the ground for some plantation, and when he saw the king, he greeted, like he welcomed him, and he continued his work. And the hermit was old and weak. As he was old and weak, he was breathing heavily because he was weak from inside, and that work was very hard. So because he was doing that kind of work, so he started breathing heavily. The king went up to the hermit and said, I have came to you, wise hermit, to ask you the answer to 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I need most? And what affairs are the most important? As you can see here, the meaning affairs means things, matter, or the business. So he asked those 3 questions to the hermit. Let us see what hermit replied. The hermit listened to the king but did not speak. He went on digging. You are tired, said the king. Let me take this pad and walk in your place. So Hermit did not reply anything. Rather, he continued doing his work. But somehow the king felt bad because he was old and weak. So he said, okay, give me your spade and let me do your work in your place. Because he felt sad because he was old enough to do that work. Then the hermit replied, thanks, said the hermit, giving the king his spade. Then he sat down on the ground. So he gave that tool, as you can see in the picture, the hermit gave this tool to the king and he sat down to take some rest on the ground. When the king had dug 2 beds, he stopped and repeated his question. Here you can see the meaning of the beds is small patches of ground for plants. So he was digging the ground for putting a bed, so where he can do his plantation work. So the hermit again gave no answer but stood up, stretching out his hand for the spade and said, now you rest and let me work. But the king did not give him the spade and continued to dig. So again the king asked the same question, but the hermit did not reply. Instead of that, he said, okay, enough. You have done enough work. Now you take some rest and let me do your work in your place. But the king did not give him the spade and he also continued to dig. 1 hour passed, then another. The sun went down behind the trees. At last the king stuck the spade into the ground and said, I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you can give me no answer, tell me so. I will return home. Now the time is passing. Now, the sun set. Now it's evening time. So now the king, he also become little bit angry from inside and he said that, listen, wise man, I came here to get my answers of my 3 questions. Whether you are going to tell me or not, tell me right now so that I will return to my home. Now in the last line you can see, here comes someone running, said the hermit. So here comes means somebody was coming towards the hermit and the hermit said, see, someone is coming, I think, towards us, said the hermit. So the first part of this story completed. Now let us start the second part of the story. The king turned round and saw a bearded man running towards them. His hands were pressed against his stomach, from which blood was flowing. When he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. That means, as in the end of the first part of the story, the hermit said that some man is coming, running towards us. So the king also turned round and he saw a bearded man. A bearded man means a man who had got beards on his face. So the king saw one bearded man was running towards them. And that bearded man's hands were pressed against his stomach. He was covering his stomach with his hand, and from which blood was flowing. And the time he reached to the king, he fainted. Fainted means lost consciousness. He fainted and fell down to the king. The king and the hermit removed the man's clothing and found a large wound in his stomach. And the king washed and covered it with his handkerchief. But the blood would not stop flowing. The king redressed the wound until at last the bleeding stopped. That means the bearded man has got a large wound on his stomach. Because of that, bloods were flowing non-stop. And he fell down and he lost his consciousness. So the king and the hermit covered it with his handkerchief, but then also the blood was not stopped flowing. First of all, they washed it and then they put a handkerchief. Then also the blood was not stopped flowing. So the king once again redressed the wound. That means once again they follow the procedure until the last the blood stopped. Redressed means dressed again. That means they again washed that area. Again they put one handkerchief and finally the bleeding stopped. The man felt better and asked for something to drink. The king brought fresh water and gave it to him. So And when the man started feeling something like better, he felt better, then he said that, can you give me something to drink? Then the king gave him some fresh water to drink. By this time the sun had set and the air was cool. The king, with the hermit's help, carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. The man closed his eyes and lay quiet. The king tried by his work, and the work he had done, lay down on the floor and slept through the night. That means when the man felt better, he asked something to drink. Then the king gave him some fresh water. At that time the sun set, and the king, with the help of the hermit's help, they carried the wounded man inside the hut and laid him on the bed. And the man was closed his eyes and he lay quiet. As well as the king was also tired, because he was also doing the work since morning. He was also digging the ground. So he was also tired. So he also went for sleep. So they both slept throughout the night. When he awoke, it was several minutes before he could remember where he was or who the strange bearded man lying on the bed was. "Forgive me," said the bearded man in a weak voice, when he saw that the king was awake. So the bearded man, the time the king awake from his sleep, bearded man joined his hand and he was begging for forgiveness, and he was telling, "Please forgive me, king." Then the king was maybe quite surprised. Then the king said, "I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for," said the king. Because king don't know him, because he don't know him before. So why you are asking me for forgiveness? Now the bearded man is replying, "You do not know me, but I know you. I am that enemy of yours who swore revenge on you, because you put my brother to death and seized my property." Seized means took by force. Seized my property. I knew you had gone alone to see that hermit, and I made up my mind to kill you on your way home. But the day passed and you did not return. So I left my hiding place and I came upon your bodyguard, who recognized me and wounded me. I escaped from him, but I should have died if you have not dressed my wounds. I wished to kill you, and you saved my life. Now if I leave, I will serve you as your most faithful servant and will order my sons to do the same. Forgive me. So this is the reason behind of why that bearded man was asking for forgiveness. Why? Because he, once the king had killed his brother, and seized means took by force, seized all the property of the bearded man. So because of that, the bearded man turned into his enemy. So bearded man got to know that the king is going to hermit place. So he made up his mind that on that way, on when he will come back from the hermit's house, and he was alone, he didn't took his bodyguard as well as his horse. So while he will come back towards his home, he will kill him on his way. But the king did not return, because he was keep on doing that work and he was helping the hermit. So where he was, that bearded man, where he hided, he left the place and he moved towards hermit house. But on the way, the bodyguard recognized that this man might be the enemy of the king and he has got a motive of killing the king. So the bodyguard, what the bodyguard do? Stabbed a knife inside his stomach of the bearded man. But somehow the bearded man escaped from that, escaped from him, and he ran away. And he reached towards the king, said that I came here to kill you, but you saved my life if you would have dressed my wound. So I was here, my motive was to kill you, but you only saved my life today. So now if I leave, so I will serve you. That means that bearded man is going to be the servant, the most faithful servant, and he will also order to his son to do the same. And lastly, again he was telling, forgive me. Okay, faithful means loyal and true. Let us see what king replied. The king was very happy to make peace with his enemy so easily and to have to won him over as a friend. He not only forgave him but said he would send his servant and his doctor to look after him, and he promised to give back the man's his property. So the king was very happy that finally I make some peace with my enemy, and now my enemy has turned into my friend. He not only forgave him, but he also sent his servants as well as his doctor to look after him, and he also promised that whatever the property he took or he seized from him, he will return back to the wounded man. Leaving the wounded man, the king went out of the hut and looked round for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to get answer to his question. The hermit was on his knees, showing seeds in the bed and that had been dug the day before. The king went up to the hermit and said, "For the last time I beg you to answer my question, wise man." So, for the last time, he said, let me try once again whether the hermit is going to reply the three questions of my answer or not. Let us see what hermit replied. "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still bending down to the ground and looking up to the king as he stood before him. "How have I answered? What do you mean?" So, the hermit is telling that you already know the answer. I don't have to tell you. And the king became very surprised to know that. So, now the king asked, "How have I answered? What do you mean?" "Don't you see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday, had not dug these beds for me, you would have gone away. Then that man would have attacked you, and you would have wished you to had stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds. And I was the most important man, and to do me good was your most important business. Afterwards, when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were caring for him, because if you had not dressed his wound, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. So here he was giving two example in through that he replied to those three questions. So first was, he was telling that if he did not help the bearded man at that particular time, what would happen? The king would have returned to his home, and while returning, what would happen? The bearded man would have killed the king, isn't it? So he wouldn't make friend, or he wouldn't make peace with his enemy. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds, because he was helping the hermit, and to do the most important man at that particular was the hermit. Hermit was the most important man, and to do good towards him was the most important business at that particular time. So he gave first example that while he was digging the bed, it was the most important time. Why? Because if he wouldn't help the hermit, then he would have returned back to his place, and while returning back to his place, that bearded man would have killed him, and the most important man was the hermit at that particular time, and to do good towards the hermit was his most important business, or you can say the most important affairs. Afterwards, another example he is giving here. What is that? That when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were caring for him. So when he was caring, when he was dressing, so that the man could survive. So that was the most important time, because why? If wouldn't have done it, the man would have died without making peace with the king. So that is the most important time when the king was caring towards the bearded man, and the bearded man was the most important person at that particular of time. And what the king has done towards the bearded man by caring and everything, that was the most important business as a king. So here also he is giving one more example. Okay, so now again he is telling that, remember then, there is only one time that is important, that the time is now. And it is the most important time because it is the only time we have any power to act. So in the past, whatever we have happened already, it's over. So that on that particular thing we don't have control. Even for future also, if we are always keep on thinking that in future I will do that, in future I will do that, and I will whatever I will do, that else also you don't have control, because in future what is going to happen you don't know. So what is there? What is the power you have to act? It is the present. The present time, that is now. So the present time is the most important time, and everyone should act very positively, and they should act without thinking much. So the present is very important because that is the only time we have any power to act upon. Okay, and the most necessary person is the person you are with at a particular moment, for no one knows what will happen in the future, whether we will meet anyone else. So in the reply to the second question, the hermit said that the most important person or the necessary person is the person with whom you are at a particular moment or in the present time, with whom you are surrounded by at a particular moment. That person is the most important person for that particular moment, because in future we don't know whether we will meet anyone else or not. Okay, so this was the in reply to the second question, that is which people should he listen to. So that is the person who are there at a particular moment in the present time. Those person are the most important person, and the most important business is to do that person good, because we were sent into this world for that purpose only. So at the last, in reply to the last question, what was the last question? Third question, what is the most important thing as a king for him to do? So the hermit said that the person who is there with you at that particular moment, to do good towards that person is the most important business or affair as a person. Means we have to do good towards that person. Okay, so that is the most important affairs, because we were sent into this world for that purpose only. That means to help one and another. Whenever they need any kind of help, it is our duty to help those person who is surrounded you. Okay, so that is your most important affair or the most important business. I think this is not only this last paragraph implies to everyone. It does not implies to only for a king, but as a person, as a human being, this we should follow in our daily life. Okay, so we should give more importance to the present time without thinking about what we have done in the past or what we are going to do in the future. So always focus on the present, and the most important person is the person who is surrounding you. That can be your parents, your grandparents, your friends. So that person is your most important person, and the most important business is to do good towards those persons who are there with you at that particular moment of time, because we are sent in this world for that purpose only, to help each other. Okay, so this story was written by Leo Tolstoy. It's a very nice story, and I hope that you all have understood this story. And you can, if you have any doubt, you can mention in the comment section given below, and also you can mention the name of the chapter and the name of the class which you want me to explain. Definitely in my next video I am going to do that. So till then, take care and thank you for watching the video.